The shotgun blast shattered the morning silence across the Nevada high desert, and Loretta Hammond stood her ground on the porch of her ranch house, smoke still curling from the barrel as three men scrambled for their horses with considerably more haste than they had arrived with. She watched them disappear in a cloud of dust down the long road that cut through the sagebrush, her heart hammering but her hands steady as she lowered the weapon. It was 1878, and this was the first time someone had tried to take what was hers, but something told her it would not be the last. Loretta had inherited the ranch 6 months earlier when her father died of a fever that swept through Tonopah Junction that winter. The land was not much to look at, just 160 acres of scrub and stone, with a decent creek running through the western edge, but it was hers by legal deed and blood. Her father had filed the claim back in 1872, worked it until his fingers bled, and built a life out of nothing but determination and sweat. She was 22 years old, unmarried, and according to most of the men in town, she had no business trying to run a ranch alone. The men who had come that morning were representatives of the Consolidated Mining Company, or so they claimed. They had papers that looked official enough, talking about mineral rights and prior claims, but Loretta had learned to read contracts and legal documents at her father's knee. Those papers were worth less than the dust they kicked up riding away. Her father's deed was recorded properly in Carson City, signed and sealed, and no amount of intimidation would change that. She went back inside and set the shotgun on its pegs above the fireplace, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. The coffee pot was still warm on the stove, and she poured herself a cup, black and bitter, just the way her father had taught her to drink it. Through the window, she could see her small herd of cattle grazing near the creek, maybe 40 head total. It was not enough to make her rich, but it was enough to survive if she was careful. The second attempt came 3 weeks later, and this time the men were not wearing suits or carrying papers. They arrived just after sunset, 4 of them, rough-looking characters with guns on their hips and whiskey on their breath. Loretta was in the barn tending to her horse when she heard them ride up, and she grabbed the rifle she had started keeping close ever since the first visit. "Nobody home," one of them called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Looks like the lady rancher went to town." "Good," another replied. "Makes this easier. We burn the barn first, then the house. She will get the message." Loretta moved silently through the barn, positioning herself near the door where she had a clear view of all 4 men. They had dismounted and were gathering kindling, actually planning to set fire to her property. Her property. The rage that flooded through her was cold and calculating, nothing like the nervous fear from the first encounter. "I would not do that if I were you," she said, stepping into the doorway with the rifle leveled at them. "This rifle holds 7 rounds, and there are only 4 of you. The math works in my favor." The men froze, and she could see the calculations running through their minds. They had expected an empty ranch, an easy job. Instead, they were facing a woman who clearly knew how to handle a weapon and had the high ground. "Now you listen here, missy," the largest of the 4 started, but Loretta cut him off. "No, you listen. I know who sent you. I know what you want. And I am telling you the same thing I told the last group. This land is mine, legal and proper, and I will shoot any man who tries to take it from me. Now you have exactly 10 seconds to get on those horses and ride out, or I start shooting," she counted. Out loud, slowly. By the time she reached 7, all 4 men were mounted and riding hard for the road. She watched until they were out of sight, then lowered the rifle and allowed herself to breathe. Her whole body was shaking now, adrenaline and fear mixing in equal measure. She had been lucky twice, but luck had a way of running out. That night she barely slept. Every sound made her reach for the rifle beside her bed. The wind rattling the shutters, a coyote howling in the distance, the settling of the old house itself. By dawn, she was exhausted but resolute. She would not be driven off her land, no matter who they sent. The third attempt came from a different angle entirely. A man named Richard Calhoun rode up to her ranch in broad daylight, alone and unarmed, dressed like a gentleman and speaking with the smooth confidence of someone used to getting his way. He was maybe 40, with silver streaking his dark hair and expensive boots that had never seen a real day's work. "Miss Hammond," he said, removing his hat with a practiced gesture, "I apologize for calling unannounced, but I have a business proposition that I believe will interest you." Loretta stood on her porch with her arms crossed, the shotgun leaning against the wall within easy reach. "If it is about buying my land, you can save your breath." "Please, hear me out," he said, flashing a smile that probably worked on most women. I represent a group of investors who are very interested in developing this area. We are prepared to offer you 3 times the value of your property. You could move to San Francisco, live like a lady instead of struggling out here in this godforsaken desert." "This desert is not godforsaken," Loretta said quietly. "It is my home, and it is not for sale at any price." Calhoun's smile faded. "Miss Hammond, I am trying to be reasonable. A woman alone cannot possibly maintain a ranch of this size. It is only a matter of time before you fail. Why not accept our generous offer and leave with your dignity intact?" "My dignity is just fine, thank you. What is not fine is you people thinking you can intimidate me, burn me out, or buy me off. The answer is no, and it will remain no. Now get off my property." His expression hardened, and for a moment she saw the real man beneath the gentleman's facade. "You are making a mistake. My associates are not as patient as I am. Your associates can go to hell, and you can join them now." He stared at her for a long moment, then jammed his hat back on his head and mounted his horse. "You will regret this, Miss Hammond. I promise you that." She watched him ride away, and a cold certainty settled in her chest. This was not over, not by a long shot, but she had held her ground 3 times now, and she would keep holding it for as long as it took. What Loretta did not know was that stories of her defiance were spreading beyond Tonopah Junction. Ranchers talked over drinks in the saloon. Merchants shared the gossip with their customers. The telegraph operator sent messages about the woman who had faced down the mining company's enforcers 3 times and sent them packing each time. And in the high country above the town, in the mountains where few men dared to venture, one particular mountain man heard those stories and took notice. His name was Levi Lancaster, though most people just called him Lancaster or the Mountain Man. He was 30 years old and had been living in the high country for the better part of a decade, trapping furs in the winter, hunting game in the summer, and coming down to civilization only when he needed supplies or had furs to sell. He was a giant of a man, 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry a full-grown elk, which he had done more than once. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, usually tied back with a strip of leather, and his beard was thick and untamed. His arms were corded with muscle from years of hard living, and his hands were calloused and scarred from 1,000 different tasks. Levi had come west after the war, one of thousands of young men who could not settle back into normal life after seeing what they had seen. The mountains had given him peace, or at least a place where the nightmares did not find him as often. He lived simply, needing little, asking for nothing. But he had his own code, his own sense of right and wrong, and the stories about Loretta Hammond stirred something in him that had been dormant for a long time. A woman defending her land against claim jumpers and company men. A woman who stood her ground when most men would have run. A woman alone. He finished his business in town, trading his furs for flour, salt, ammunition, and coffee. Then, instead of heading back to his cabin in the high country, he pointed his massive bay horse toward the Hammond ranch. He told himself he was just curious, just wanted to see if the stories were true. But something deeper was pulling him, something he did not quite understand. The Hammond ranch came into view as the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. It was a modest spread, the house small but well-maintained, the barn sturdy, a corral with a few horses. He could see cattle grazing by the creek in the distance. And on the porch, silhouetted against the fading light, stood a woman with a rifle. Levi reined in his horse well before he reached the house, not wanting to spook her. "Hello, the house," he called out, his voice deep and carrying easily across the distance. "I mean no harm, just passing through and wondered if I might water my horse." Loretta had seen him coming from a mile away. Hard to miss a man that size on a horse that big. She kept the rifle ready, but not aimed, watching him carefully. He did not move like the men who had come before, did not have that air of threat about him, but she had learned not to trust easily. "You can water your horse," she called back, "but do it slow and keep your hands where I can see them." Levi nodded and dismounted. Moving with deliberate care, he led his horse toward the trough near the barn, his movements easy and unhurried. Up close, Loretta could see just how massive he was, all muscle and power, but there was a gentleness in the way he handled his horse that made her relax slightly. "You are Loretta Hammond," he said as his horse drank. It was not a question. "I am. And you are?" "Levi Lancaster. Most folks call me the Mountain Man." He glanced at her rifle. "Heard you have been having some trouble." "Nothing I cannot handle," she said, but she lowered the rifle a fraction. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Loretta felt something shift in the air between them. She was not a delicate woman, not after years of ranch work, but compared to him, she felt small. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical braid, her dress simple and worn, her hands rough from work. She was not what most men would call beautiful, but there was strength in her face, determination in her green eyes, and Levi found himself wanting to know more. 3 times, he said quietly. 3 times they came, and 3 times you sent them running. That takes courage. Or stubbornness, Loretta replied, surprised to find herself almost smiling. My father always said I had more stubbornness than sense. Your father was Samuel Hammond? You knew him? Met him a few times when I came down for supplies. He was a good man. I am sorry for your loss. The simple sincerity in his words caught her off guard, and she felt tears prick her eyes. Most people in town had offered empty condolences, but this stranger spoke like he actually meant it. Thank you, she said softly. Levi's horse finished drinking, and he should have mounted up and ridden on. That was what he had planned to do. Instead, he found himself saying, "Those men will come back. You know that, right? I know you cannot stay awake forever, cannot watch every direction at once. I know that too," her chin lifted defiantly, "but I will not give up what is mine." He admired her, and he made a decision that surprised him even as he spoke the words. I could stay for a while, help keep watch, make sure they think twice before coming back. Loretta stared at him, suspicion and hope warring in her expression. You do not know me. No, he agreed, but I knew your father, and I do not like seeing people pushed around by those with more money and fewer morals. Besides, winter is still a few months off. I have time. She wanted to say yes. The relief of not being alone, of having someone to watch her back, was almost overwhelming, but she had learned to be careful. I cannot pay you much, do not need much. A place to sleep, some food, and I will earn my keep. I am good with repairs, good with animals, and I am very good at discouraging unwanted visitors. His eyes, she noticed, were a startling blue, like the sky over the mountains on a clear day. Loretta made her own decision then, trusting her instincts the way her father had taught her. All right, you can stay in the barn. There is a room in the back that is clean and dry. I will bring you some supper in an hour. Levi nodded, a small smile tugging at his bearded face. Appreciate it, Miss Hammond. Loretta, she said. If you are going to be staying, you might as well call me Loretta. Loretta, he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. I am Levi. He led his horse to the barn, and Loretta went inside to prepare supper, her mind racing. She had just invited a strange man to stay on her property, a man she knew nothing about except for town gossip and the fact that he had kind eyes. It could be a terrible mistake, or it could be the answer to a prayer she had been too proud to speak aloud. Over the next few weeks, Levi proved his worth 10 times over. He repaired the fence along the north pasture that had been sagging for months. He fixed the barn door that had been sticking since before her father died. He gentled a young horse that had been too wild for Loretta to handle alone, spending patient hours working with the animal until it would accept a saddle. He was up before dawn and worked until sunset, asking for nothing beyond the simple meals she provided and the place to sleep. But more than the physical help, his presence changed everything about the ranch. Loretta slept through the night for the first time in months, knowing that someone was watching, someone who knew how to handle himself. She caught herself listening for the sound of his footsteps, watching for glimpses of him working around the property. He was a quiet man, not given to unnecessary conversation, but when he did speak, his words were thoughtful and kind. They fell into a routine. She would cook breakfast before dawn, and they would eat together in comfortable silence, planning the day's work. They would work separately through the day, she tending the cattle and house, he handling the heavier repairs and maintenance. In the evenings they would sit on the porch as the desert cooled, drinking coffee and talking about small things. The weather, the cattle, the garden she was trying to grow despite the harsh conditions. Loretta found herself noticing things about him. The way his muscles flexed when he lifted heavy beams for the corral repair. The care he took with the animals. The rare smile that transformed his serious face. The way he always made sure she ate before he did, a small gesture of courtesy that touched her more than she wanted to admit. Levi noticed things too. The way she never complained, no matter how hard the work. The quiet strength in her eyes. The soft sound of her humming while she worked in the garden. The way the sunset turned her hair to gold. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to share space with another person, to care whether someone else was tired or worried or happy. One evening, about a month after he arrived, Loretta worked up the courage to ask him about his past. They were sitting on the porch, the stars coming out overhead in that brilliant desert display that never failed to take her breath away. "You were in the war," she said quietly. It was not a question. Levi was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "Union Army. Fought in Virginia and Tennessee, saw more death than any man should see." "Is that why you went to the mountains?" "Partly. I could not go back to farming in Ohio, could not pretend like everything was normal when nothing felt normal anymore. The mountains gave me peace, or at least quiet. Do you miss it?" "The quiet?" He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious in the lamplight spilling from the house. "Not as much as I thought I would." Something in the air between them shifted, became charged with possibility. Loretta felt her heart speed up, felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee she was drinking. This was dangerous territory. Letting herself feel this way about a man who would leave when winter came, who belonged to the mountains and the solitary life he had built there. Before either of them could say anything more, they heard the sound of horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast. Levi was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the rifle he kept nearby. Loretta grabbed her shotgun from inside the door, and they stood together, watching the darkness beyond the reach of the lamplight. 6 riders came into view, and Loretta recognized Richard Calhoun in the lead. Her stomach dropped. 6 men, all armed, and this time they did not look like they had come to talk. "Miss Hammond," Calhoun called out, reining in his horse just beyond the porch. His eyes flicked to Levi, and she saw calculation there, reassessment. "I see you have hired help. I see you brought an army," Loretta replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "That tells me everything I need to know about your intentions." "My intentions are the same as they have always been. To acquire this property one way or another. You have refused every reasonable offer, so now we are done being reasonable." Levi stepped forward, and Loretta heard one of the riders gasp. She understood why. In the lamplight, Levi looked even more massive than usual, his shoulders blocking out the stars behind him, his presence radiating barely contained power. "The lady said no," Levi said, his voice low and dangerous. "That means no. Now you and your friends need to turn around and ride out while you still can." Calhoun laughed, but it sounded forced. "1 man against 6? Those are poor odds, Mountain Man. Maybe. But I guarantee you that I will take at least 3 of you with me before I go down. The question is, which 3 of you want to die tonight?" Levi's rifle moved slightly, just enough to make his point. "Because I will start with you, Calhoun. That is a promise." The silence that followed was absolute. Loretta could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the tension crackling in the air like lightning about to strike. The men behind Calhoun shifted nervously in their saddles. They had signed up for intimidation, not a suicide mission against a mountain man who clearly meant every word he said. "This is not over," Calhoun finally said, his voice tight with rage. "Yes, it is," Levi replied, "because if I see you on this property again, I will not bother with warnings. I will just shoot, and then I will take a ride to Carson City and have a talk with the federal marshal about claim jumping, arson, and attempted murder. I am guessing he will be very interested in your business practices." Calhoun stared at them for a long moment, then yanked his horse around. "Let's go," he snarled at his men, and they rode off into the darkness. Loretta did not realize she had been holding her breath until they were gone. She exhaled shakily and lowered the shotgun, her hands trembling. "You think that will be the end of it?" "Yes," Levi said, and he sounded certain. "Men like Calhoun are bullies. They only push when there is no one to push back. He knows now that you are not alone, and he knows I meant what I said. He will find easier prey." She looked up at him, this giant of a man who had appeared in her life like something out of a story, and felt something break open in her chest. "Thank you. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been here." "You would have figured something out," he said, and there was admiration in his voice. "You are stronger than you think, Loretta." The way he said her name, soft and warm, made her heart ache. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the worn fabric of his shirt. "Stay," she said quietly. "Not just until winter. Stay." Levi looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Longing, hope, fear. "You do not know what you are asking," he said roughly. "I am not civilized, Loretta. I have been alone too long. I do not know how to be around people anymore." "You have been around me for a month, and it seems to be working fine," she pointed out, her hand still on his arm. "I am not asking you to change. I am just asking you to stay." "Why?" The word was almost a whisper. Because I do not want to be alone anymore, she admitted, the truth of it breaking something open inside her. Because when I think about you leaving, I feel like I am losing something precious before I even really had it. Because in the last month I have felt more at peace than I have in years, and it is because you are here. Levi raised his hand slowly, carefully, and touched her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so large and powerful. His calloused fingers traced her cheekbone, and she leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward the sun. I am afraid, he said hoarsely, afraid of wanting this too much, afraid of not being what you need. I am afraid too, she whispered, but I am more afraid of not trying. He bent down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not. When his lips touched hers, it was soft and tentative, a question more than a demand. She answered by rising on her toes, wrapping her arms around his neck, kissing him back with all the loneliness and longing she had been carrying for so long. The kiss deepened, and Levi wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off her feet as easily as if she weighed nothing. She felt small and protected in his embrace, but also powerful, because this strong man was trembling against her, as affected as she was by the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he set her down gently but did not let go. I do not have much to offer, he said, his forehead resting against hers. No money, no fancy education, just myself and whatever work these hands can do. That is more than enough, she said fiercely. That is everything. They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, and Loretta felt something settle in her soul. This was right. This was home. Not just the land or the house, but this man, this moment, this feeling of finally being seen and valued for exactly who she was. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness that Loretta had never imagined possible. Levi stayed, and together they worked the ranch into something better than it had ever been. He taught her how to track game, how to read the weather in the shape of the clouds. She taught him how to make proper bread, how to coax vegetables from the stubborn desert soil. They worked side by side, talked for hours, and fell more deeply in love with each passing day. When winter came to the high country, Levi did not leave for his mountain cabin. He stayed in the barn room at first, propriety dictating they maintain separate quarters, but by the time the first snow fell on the distant peaks, he had moved into the house. They were married in the small church in Tonopah Junction on a crisp November morning, with half the town in attendance. The preacher had smiled when pronouncing them man and wife, and when Levi kissed his bride, there were tears in more than one set of eyes. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a revelation for both of them. Loretta had never known that such intimacy was possible, that desire and love could combine into something so powerful it made her weep with joy. Levi was gentle despite his size and strength, worshiping her body with his hands and mouth until she was gasping his name. And when they finally came together, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, two lonely souls finding completion in each other. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Levi's knowledge of hunting and tracking helped them avoid predators that had been taking cattle. Loretta's careful accounting and planning ensured they made the most of every dollar. By the following spring, they had doubled the size of the herd and were making plans to expand the house. One evening in early summer, Loretta realized that her monthly courses had not come. At first, she thought it was just the stress of hard work, but when another month passed, she knew she was carrying Levi's child. The knowledge filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She was going to be a mother. They were going to be a family. She told him that night after supper, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. There is someone new joining the ranch, she said softly. Come winter, you are going to be a father. Levi stared at her, his blue eyes wide with shock, then slowly dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her belly. She felt his shoulders shake and realized he was crying, this strong mountain man undone by the news that they had created life together. I never thought, he said, his voice muffled against her dress. I never let myself hope for something like this. A wife, a child, a family. Hope now, she said, running her fingers through his long hair. Hope for everything, because we are going to have it all. The pregnancy was not easy. The desert heat was brutal that summer, and Loretta struggled with sickness and exhaustion. But Levi was there every step of the way, taking on more of the work, making sure she rested, bringing her cool water and whatever food she could keep down. He treated her like she was made of glass, and she had to keep reminding him that she was not going to break. In December, when the first real cold of winter hit the desert, Loretta went into labor, The midwife came from town, a stern woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had delivered half the babies in the county. Levi was banished to the barn, tradition dictating that men had no place in the birthing room, but he paced like a caged animal, unable to settle, listening to every cry from the house with his heart in his throat. After 12 hours of labor, Loretta gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel after her father, and when the midwife finally let Levi into the room, he stood frozen in the doorway, staring at his wife and son like they were a miracle he could not quite believe in. "Come meet your son," Loretta said, exhausted but glowing with joy. Levi approached slowly, reverently, and when she placed the tiny bundle in his massive arms, he looked down at that small red face and fell completely, irrevocably in love all over again. "He is perfect. You are perfect. How did I get this lucky?" "We both got lucky," Loretta said, smiling up at him. "We found each other." Samuel was a healthy, happy baby who quickly became the center of their world. Levi was a natural father, patient and gentle despite his size. Loretta would find him in the middle of the night, standing by the cradle, just watching the baby sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. During the day, he worked with Samuel strapped to his back in a sling Loretta fashioned from soft leather, talking to his son about the ranch, the animals, the mountains. The years passed, each one bringing new joys and challenges. When Samuel was 2, Loretta became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to twin girls they named Rose and Ruth. The house that had once seemed too large for one person now rang with laughter and the chaos of 3 active children. Levi built additions, expanding their home to accommodate their growing family, his hands creating something solid and permanent for the people he loved. The ranch grew as well. They bought more land from a neighbor who was ready to retire, expanding their grazing area. They hired help during the busy seasons, good men who respected Levi and worked hard. The cattle herd grew to over 200 head, and they were able to purchase new equipment, better horses, all the things that made the work easier. But it was not the material success that mattered most to either of them. It was the life they had built together, the family they had created. It was evenings on the porch, watching their children play while the sun set over the desert. It was the way Levi still looked at Loretta, like she hung the moon, even after years of marriage and the hardships of ranch life. It was the way she still felt her heart skip when he smiled at her, still reached for him in the night and found him reaching back. When Samuel was 10 and the twins were 8, they took a trip to Carson City to register some new land claims. It was the first time the whole family had been to the city, and the children were wide-eyed at the buildings, the crowds, the bustle of civilization. But Loretta noticed that Levi was uncomfortable, his shoulders tight, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. He was a man of open spaces and solitude, and the press of people made him tense. That night in their hotel room, after the children were asleep, she came to him and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You are thinking about the mountains," she said quietly. "How did you know?" he asked, covering her hands with his. "Because I know you, and because I can see it in your eyes. You miss it sometimes, do you not? The solitude, the quiet?" He was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "Sometimes. Not enough to leave, never enough to leave. But yes, I miss it. We could visit," she suggested. "Take the children up to the high country for a few weeks. Let them see where you lived, what you love about it." Levi turned in her arms and looked down at her with such love that it took her breath away. "You would do that? For you? I would do anything." So the next summer they packed up supplies and headed into the mountains, all 5 of them on horseback with pack mules carrying their gear. It was hard going for the children at first, the trails steep and the air thin, but they adapted quickly. Levi showed them his old cabin, the streams where he had trapped beaver, the meadows where elk grazed. He taught Samuel to track and hunt, showed the twins how to identify edible plants and read animal signs. Loretta watched him come alive in the mountains in a way she had never quite seen before, and she understood with new clarity what he had given up to stay with her. The freedom, the wildness, the life he had built before she came into it. And yet he had never once made her feel like it was a sacrifice, had never looked back with regret. On their last night before heading back to the ranch, they sat around the campfire while the children slept. Levi pulled Loretta close, tucking her against his side, and they watched the stars wheel overhead in the crystalline mountain air. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For understanding, for giving me this." He gestured at the mountains around them. "But mostly for giving me a reason to leave it behind. I love this life, but I love our life more. I love you more." She tilted her face up to kiss him, tasting coffee and smoke and love. I know, and I love you, more than I ever thought possible." They returned to the ranch renewed and happy, and life continued its steady rhythm. The children grew, strong and capable, learning to work the ranch and love the land the way their parents did. Samuel grew tall like his father, with the same blue eyes and quiet strength. Rose and Ruth were as different as two people could be, despite being twins. Rose bold and adventurous, Ruth gentle and thoughtful. But both were fierce when it came to protecting what was theirs. When Loretta was 38 and Levi was 46, they had one final surprise. Another baby, a boy they named William, who came into the world squalling and red-faced and perfect. The older children doted on their baby brother, and Levi joked that he would never get to hold his own son because one of them always had him. As William grew, Loretta sometimes thought back to that day when the first group of men had tried to take her land, to those terrifying weeks when she had stood alone against forces that seemed overwhelming. She thought about how close she had come to losing everything, how different her life might have been if she had given in to fear or accepted one of those buyout offers. And she thought about Levi, riding down from the mountains because he had heard stories about a woman who would not be moved. She had been so suspicious of him at first, so certain that he must have some ulterior motive for offering to help. But he had proven, day after day and year after year, that his motives were exactly what they seemed. A good man wanting to help, and then a lonely man finding love. One evening, when Loretta was 45 and they had been married for 17 years, she and Levi sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were inside, Samuel helping the twins with their schoolwork, while William played with his toy horses on the floor. It was a peaceful moment, the kind they had learned to treasure. "Do you ever wonder," Loretta said, "what would have happened if you had not come down from the mountains that day?" Levi was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "No, because I cannot imagine any other life than this one. Cannot imagine not having you, not having them." He nodded toward the house, where they could hear Samuel laughing at something Ruth said. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted, "about how scared I was, facing all of it alone. About how close I came to losing the ranch, losing everything my father built." "You would not have lost it," Levi said with certainty. "You are too stubborn, too strong. You would have found a way. Maybe. But I am so grateful I did not have to find out. I am grateful you came. Grateful you stayed. Grateful for every single day we have had together." He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "When I was living up in the mountains, I thought I was happy. Thought I had everything I needed. But I was just existing, Loretta. You taught me the difference between existing and living. You gave me a reason to be more than just a man hiding in the wilderness." "You were never hiding," she said softly. "You were healing, and when you were ready, you came down and saved me." "No," he said, his blue eyes serious and warm. "We saved each other." And that, Loretta thought, was the simple truth. They had saved each other. She had given him a reason to rejoin the world, to open his heart again after the war had closed it. He had given her protection, partnership, and a love so deep and true that it still took her breath away after all these years. The years continued to roll by, bringing the joys and sorrows that come with any life well lived. They lost friends to old age and accident. They weathered droughts and harsh winters. They saw their children grow into adults, Samuel taking over more and more of the ranch management, the twins finding their own paths, William showing signs of being a natural horseman. When Loretta was 50, Samuel married a schoolteacher from Tonopah Junction, a smart, kind woman named Emma, who fit into the family as if she had always been there. A year later, they welcomed Loretta and Levi's first grandchild, a girl named Lily. Holding that baby in her arms, Loretta felt the circle of life completing itself in the most beautiful way. Her father had built this ranch, she and Levi had expanded and secured it, and now the next generation would carry it forward. Levi aged gracefully, the gray in his hair and beard only making him more distinguished. His body was still strong from a lifetime of hard work, though he moved a bit slower on cold mornings. Loretta teased him about it, and he would pull her close and prove that he was not too old for anything that mattered. They established a tradition of gathering the whole family for Sunday dinners, the house full to bursting with children and grandchildren, noise and laughter and love. Levi would sit at the head of the table, Loretta at the other end, and they would share looks across the chaos, remembering when it had been just the two of them, alone and finding each other. One Sunday, when Loretta was 55, Samuel stood up after dinner and cleared his throat. "Emma and I have an announcement," he said, smiling down at his wife. "We are expecting again." But his twins. The room erupted in congratulations and excitement, and Levi laughed, the sound booming and joyful. Twins run in the family, he said, winking at Rose and Ruth, who rolled their eyes but smiled. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Loretta and Levi lay in bed together, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Twins, she said, smiling in the darkness. Poor Samuel and Emma. They will manage, Levi said, his hand stroking her hair. Same way we managed. Same way everyone manages when they are doing it for love. Do you ever regret it, she asked, a question she had never quite dared to ask before. Giving up your life in the mountains, taking on a wife and children and all the responsibilities that come with that? She felt him stiffen slightly, then relax. Never. Not for one single second. My life in the mountains was about surviving, Loretta. My life with you has been about living. There is no comparison. She tilted her head up to kiss him, this man who had been her savior, her partner, her great love. I love you, Levi Lancaster. More now than the day we married, and I did not think that was possible. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You are everything I never knew I needed. Everything I never thought I deserved. You deserve all the happiness in the world, she said fiercely. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. As the years continued to pass, the ranch became a legacy in Tonopah Junction. People spoke of the Hammond-Lancaster Ranch as an example of what determination and hard work could achieve. They spoke of Loretta, the woman who had faced down claim jumpers 3 times and refused to be moved. They spoke of Levi, the mountain man who had come down from the high country and found a home. But mostly, they spoke of the love story. The widow defending her land alone, the solitary trapper hearing about her courage and coming to help. The unlikely partnership that had turned into a marriage that weathered everything life could throw at it. Young couples would ask Loretta the secret to a long and happy marriage, and she always gave the same answer. Find someone who sees you for who you really are and loves you anyway, she would say. Someone who will stand beside you when things are hard. Someone who makes you laugh even when you want to cry. And then hold on to them with everything you have, because that kind of love is rare and precious and worth fighting for. When Loretta was 60, Levi suggested they take another trip to the mountains, just the two of them this time. The ranch was in good hands with Samuel running the day-to-day operations, and they could afford to be away for a few weeks. She agreed, excited at the prospect of having him to herself without the demands of family and work. They rode into the high country in early summer when the meadows were carpeted with wildflowers and the streams ran clear and cold with snowmelt. Levi took her to all his favorite places, showing her the life he had lived before she came into it. They fished for trout in crystal lakes, slept under the stars, and made love in a meadow surrounded by peaks that touched the sky. One night, lying wrapped in blankets beside their campfire, Loretta looked up at the stars and felt a profound sense of peace. This was where Levi had been when she needed him most, these mountains that seemed to touch heaven. And he had left all this beauty and freedom because he heard she needed help, because his heart recognized hers before they ever met. What are you thinking? Levi asked, his arm tightening around her. About fate, she said. About how all the terrible things that happened, the men trying to take the ranch, the fear and the loneliness, all of it led to you. And I would go through it all again, 1,000 times, if it meant ending up here with you. I am the lucky one, he said softly. I was half alive up here, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live again. You and the children, the ranch, the life we built together. You gave me everything. They stayed in the mountains for 3 weeks, reconnecting with each other in the silence and beauty of the wilderness. When they finally returned to the ranch, they were both renewed, reminded of the foundation their love was built on and the journey they had taken together. Life continued its beautiful, complicated rhythm. More grandchildren came until Loretta lost count of how many times she had been called Grandma. The ranch expanded again, now one of the most successful in the region. Samuel proved to be an excellent manager, with Emma handling the business side of things with a sharp mind for numbers. Rose married a banker from Carson City and moved away, though she visited often. Ruth married a neighboring rancher, keeping her close. William, to everyone's surprise, decided to become a doctor and went back east for school. Through it all, Levi and Loretta remained the center of the family, the foundation everything else was built on. They grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They still held hands while walking around the ranch, still kissed each other goodbye every morning and hello every evening. still looked at each other across a crowded room and smiled, sharing private jokes and memories that spanned decades. When Loretta was 68, she fell ill with a fever that would not break. The doctor came from town, grave-faced, and told Levi there was nothing to be done but keep her comfortable and wait. Levi refused to accept it. He sat by her bedside day and night, bathing her face with cool cloths, holding her hand, talking to her even when she was too delirious to respond. The family gathered, grown children and grandchildren filling the house, but Levi would not leave her side. He had faced down claim jumpers and survived the war and built a life out of nothing. But the thought of losing Loretta terrified him more than anything he had ever encountered. On the fourth night, her fever finally broke. She opened her eyes to find him there, his face haggard with exhaustion and worry, his hand still holding hers. "You look terrible," she whispered, her voice weak but her spirit clearly intact. Levi laughed, the sound breaking on a sob. "You scared me half to death, woman." "Cannot get rid of me that easily," she said, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had. "We still have too much living to do." She recovered slowly but surely, and Levi hovered over her like a mother hen until she threatened to brain him with her walking stick. But she understood. The illness had shaken him, reminded him that their time together was not infinite. So she was patient with his worry, accepting his help when she would normally have insisted on doing things herself. As she regained her strength, they talked about the life they had built, the choices they had made. "I have no regrets," Loretta told him one evening as they sat on the porch, her hand in his. "Not a single one. Every day with you has been a gift." "Even the hard days?" he asked, thinking of the droughts they had weathered, the cattle they had lost, the struggles that came with any life. "Especially the hard days," she said, "because those are the ones that proved what we have. Anyone can be in love when things are easy. It is the hard times that show you what your love is really made of, and ours has proven to be stronger than anything life could throw at us." They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 3 generations of family. Looking around the crowded house, at all the life and love they had created, Loretta felt her heart might burst with joy. This was the life she had fought for when those men tried to take her land. This was what she had been defending, though she had not known it at the time. Not just the property, but the possibility of everything it could become. Levi stood and raised his glass, his voice still strong despite his 78 years. "To my wife," he said, looking at Loretta with eyes that held the same love they had that first night he kissed her, "who is the strongest, most stubborn, most wonderful woman I have ever known, who stood her ground when others would have run, who took a chance on a broken-down mountain man and gave him a reason to live. I love you more today than yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than today." "To Grandpa and Grandma," Samuel said, raising his own glass, "who taught us that love is not just a feeling, but a choice you make every single day. Who showed us what it means to build a life together, to stand by each other no matter what. You are the foundation of this family, and we are all blessed to be part of your story." Loretta wiped tears from her eyes, too overcome to speak. Levi came to her and pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in his arms the way he had 1,000 times before. She fit against him perfectly, her head on his chest, his chin resting on her hair. They swayed slightly, dancing to music only they could hear, lost in each other despite the room full of family. As the years continued, they began to slow down. Levi's knees troubled him some days, the legacy of too many years working in all weather. Loretta's hands ached with arthritis, though she still insisted on working in her garden. But they adapted, helping each other with tasks that had become difficult, making accommodations without complaint. The ranch was firmly in the hands of the next generation now, with Samuel's oldest son showing real leadership potential. Levi and Loretta were free to enjoy their twilight years without the constant pressure of work. They spent long mornings in bed, talking and laughing and making love with the slow tenderness of people who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. They took walks around the property, moving slowly but enjoying every step, remembering all the life they had lived in these spaces. One evening, when Loretta was 75 and Levi was 83, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. It was the same view they had shared thousands of times, but it never got old. "Do you remember the first time you saw this ranch?" Loretta asked, her hand in his. "I do," Levi said. "I saw a small house, a sturdy barn, and a woman with a rifle standing on this very porch. I thought you were the bravest thing I had ever seen." "I was terrified," she admitted. "So scared and so tired of being scared. And then you showed up, this giant of a man offering to help for no reason that made sense. I did not trust it at first, I know, but I am glad you took a chance on me anyway. Best decision I ever made, she said softly. Well, second best. The first best was refusing to give up this land, because if I had sold out I would never have been here when you came looking. Fate, Levi said, or God, or luck, or whatever you want to call it. Something brought us together, and I will be grateful for that until my last breath. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge. These were the moments Loretta treasured most now, the quiet times with the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything for more than 30 years. She knew their time together was growing short, knew that at their age every day was a gift. But she did not waste energy on fear or regret. Instead, she poured all her love into each moment, making sure Levi knew how much he meant to her. When Loretta was 77, Levi began to fail. It was not one dramatic event, but a slow decline, his strength ebbing like the tide going out. He slept more, ate less, and though his mind remained sharp, his body was giving out after a long, hard life. The doctor said his heart was simply worn out, and there was nothing to be done. Loretta refused to let him die in a sickbed if she could help it. On good days, she would help him out to the porch, where he could feel the sun on his face and watch the ranch he had helped build. She read to him, talked to him about their life together, made sure he knew he was loved every single moment. The family came to say goodbye, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Levi blessed them all, told them he was proud, made sure they knew the ranch was in good hands. But his eyes always found Loretta, and she knew that she was his primary concern. He was worried about leaving her alone. On what would be his last night, Loretta climbed into bed beside him, curling against his side the way she had for decades. His arm came around her automatically, the gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "Do not be afraid," she whispered. "I am right here. I am not going anywhere." "I know," he said, his voice barely audible. "But I hate leaving you. You are not leaving me," she said fiercely. "You are just going ahead, and when my time comes you better be waiting for me on the other side, Levi Lancaster. Do you hear me?" She felt him smile against her hair. "I will be there, I promise. First one there saves a spot by the creek. Deal," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you. I have loved you from almost the first moment I saw you, and I will love you until I take my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," he whispered. "You were my salvation, Loretta, my reason for living. Thank you for giving me a life worth living." His breathing grew slower, more labored, and she held him close, talking softly about all their memories, all the beautiful moments they had shared. She told him about the first time he kissed her, their wedding day, the birth of their children, every precious moment of their life together. And when he finally took his last breath, she was there, holding him, loving him, making sure he did not leave this world alone. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. But Loretta had promised him she would be all right, and she kept her promises. She leaned on her family, accepted their love and support, and slowly found a way to keep living in a world without him. She stayed on the ranch, in the house they had shared, surrounded by memories of their life together. She worked in the garden he had built for her, sat on the porch where they had shared so many evenings, slept in the bed where they had loved each other for so many years. And she talked to him, certain that somehow he could hear her, sharing her days and her thoughts and her continuing love. The years after Levi's death were quiet but not unhappy. Loretta found joy in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in watching the ranch continue to thrive under Samuel's management. She wrote down the story of her life with Levi, wanting future generations to know about the love that had sustained them through everything. When Loretta was 82, she woke one morning with a strange sense of peace. She felt lighter somehow, as if a weight she had been carrying was finally lifting. She got up and went through her morning routine, then walked out to the porch one last time to watch the sunrise over the desert she loved. Samuel found her there an hour later, sitting peacefully in her chair, a smile on her face. She was gone as quietly and gracefully as she had lived. In her hand was a letter she had written, addressed to her family. Samuel opened it with shaking hands and read aloud to the gathered family. "My dearest children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, if you are reading this, then my time has come, and I have gone to join Levi. Do not mourn for me. I have lived a full and beautiful life, richer than I ever dreamed possible. I was loved deeply by the best man I ever knew, and I loved him in return with everything I had. This ranch was not just land to your grandfather and me. It was proof that we could build something lasting, something that would outlive us and provide for generations to come. We fought for it, worked for it, and poured our lives into it. But more than that, it was the place where we built our love, where we raised our family, where we lived the kind of life that most people only dream about. Remember that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice, a commitment, a decision to stand by someone through good times and bad. Your grandfather and I chose each other every single day for more than 30 years, and I would make that choice again in a heartbeat. Take care of each other. Take care of this land. And remember that the greatest legacy we leave you is not the ranch or the cattle or the money. It is the love we showed you, the example we set, the proof that a life built on love and hard work can withstand anything. I love you all. And now I am going home to the man who has been waiting for me. With all my love, Loretta Hammond Lancaster. There was not a dry eye in the room. Samuel carefully folded the letter and placed it in the family Bible, next to the marriage certificate and the original land deed his grandfather had filed all those years ago. Loretta was buried next to Levi on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together on their first anniversary. The headstone was simple, just their names and dates in one line, together forever. The Hammond Lancaster Ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation, the story of Loretta and Levi becoming family legend. Children grew up hearing about the woman who defended her land 3 times and the mountain man who came down to help her and stayed for love. They learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand firm despite it. They learned that love was worth fighting for, worth any sacrifice, worth everything. And on quiet evenings, when the family gathered on that same porch to watch the sunset, they swore they could sometimes feel the presence of 2 people watching over them, a strong hand and a gentle one, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would last forever. The land that Loretta had defended so fiercely became a testament to her courage and Levi's love. The house they had expanded over the years still stood, lovingly maintained by their descendants. The creek where they had walked together still ran clear and cold, and somewhere in the mountains there was a meadow full of wildflowers where they had once made love under the stars, where the memory of their passion and joy seemed to linger in the very air. Their story ended not with sadness but with triumph. 2 lonely people finding each other, 2 strong souls creating something lasting, 2 hearts becoming one. It was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh beauty of the Nevada desert and the high mountain peaks, a reminder that the greatest fortunes are not measured in gold or land, but in the love we give and receive. And if you listen carefully on summer evenings, when the wind blew down from the mountains and across the high desert, you might hear the echo of laughter, the soft murmur of voices, and know that somewhere, somehow, Loretta and Levi were still together, still in love, still watching over the land they had fought for and the family they had created. Their love had not ended with death. It had simply moved beyond it, eternal and unbreakable, a light that would never dim.